I initially went into this one with the full knowledge that I wouldn't be able to recommend this game to anyone, and that still might be true. Mechanically it's fine, even the level of branching paths is actually pretty impressive, but still something about this rubbed me the wrong way a little, and it's probably not for the reasons you think. Dustborn was released in 2024, and is a narrative adventure with a small amount of combat and some rhythm game sections. This should be the perfect game for me on paper. I loved games like The Wolf Among Us, and plenty of walking simulators, but most of these games either have interesting characters, or the games are short enough that they don't overstay their welcome. Neither are true for this. I did a very thorough first playthrough of Dustborn, exploring every edge of the game, and talking and listening to all the dialogue from all the different characters, and trust me, you meet a lot of people you can talk to in this game. The problem is though, they're just all horrible people, who all play themselves off as being the moral compass and accepting all walks of life, even though in reality they're all just criminals and manipulative assholes. Even though there is some character development over the story, and their views on things do change, it's not enough to make them likeable people. I'm not here though just to shit on this game and call it woke rubbish, that'd just be too easy, and I don't think it's completely true. I also don't like to throw that kind of description around, but if you were playing a woke bingo, this probably would be a winner. Yes, throughout the game, they do like to go off on different tangents about things like gender politics, but it's not as much as you would think, although the game definitely does have a certain agenda. It just seems like a strange thing to stop and talk about when you're running for your life from multiple groups who are trying to hunt you down. It also happens at times that you just wouldn't expect. This was so much so that during my multiple playthroughs, the girlfriend kept asking me if the game was a parody. This might be because it contains what feels like a diverse cast just for diversity's sake. They're like so diverse that they wouldn't be friends in real life. Not everybody from marginalised communities would be willing to just get together just because they feel like an outsider when they have nothing in common. You see, this isn't just me saying it's a couple of LGBT people. There wouldn't be an issue with this, would there? People can live their lives however they want, and all the people from these groups I've met in real life and spoke to have been lovely people. But let me explain the characteristics of a few of these people in the game. An overweight Muslim lady with vitiligo who can turn to stone, which she doesn't actually do, but she does start to harden up at points. A Ron Jeremy looking dwarf who heals people through reading poetry. A non-binary person who is self-obsessed and has the power of gaslighting people. An Asian lady with one eye who can phase through things. A small mute child. A straight Mexican Catholic man who's also a computer hacker. A quadriplegic granny pervert whose power is never shown, the others just keep saying they don't want to talk about it. A robot who transitions gender. An African American man who walks around in a colourful codpiece projecting holographic stories. Yeah, he brings his words to life or something, I don't know. A woman who has the power to project pain, doesn't seem to enjoy anything. She believes she's dead when you first meet her. And finally, our main protagonist, an African American girl with the power to wield her words and influence the world. Basically, use her words as weapons. None of these traits in people are bad in any way. As I've said, people can be whoever they want to be. But even in the story when they're drawn to each other, it still feels like getting this many diverse people into a bus at one time would be a statistical nightmare. So as I said, these people don't seem to like anyone they come into contact with. This includes Justice, the fascists you're trying to escape, the Puritans, a godlike / cult set of weirdos, and even each other. This includes when you're trying to keep everyone friendly. They only really seem to say anything nice about each other 10 minutes before the end of the game, and my first run of this game was 23 hours long. I will also add, every time I played the game, every playthrough, in the final conversation the game crashed and I had to restart it. Didn't lose any save progress, but it was just annoying. Right, back on topic. I myself am not a religious guy, and I don't want to put anyone down for their faith. I'm also not mega clued up on what people believe, but one bit just didn't sit right with me. Early in the story, they all stop at a diner, and one goes off to make a phone call. The Muslim girl wants to mess with their food order. The guy who had left had ordered a salad, and they all think he's a vegetarian, so she changes his order to include a load of bacon. It's just something I didn't think she would add to a dish, even for a joke. It might be fine as they aren't eating it, but it just seems like an odd choice. Anyway, I'm going to have to try and explain the story of Dustborn with spoilers included, sadly, to have any chance of making this make sense. Which it most likely still won't. I've beat this 3 times and still have questions. So this game takes place in an alternative timeline where Kennedy survived the assassination attempt, and it was the First Lady who actually perished. This means he got together with Marilyn Monroe, making her become the First Lady. I don't have the biggest knowledge of American history and their presidents, but it doesn't feel like if this happened, it would cause JFK to set up a militarized police state. But that's where this game goes. Well, basically, later on down the road, future presidents have gone a bit too far with this idea, and America becomes this draconian hellhole known as the American Republic. At the turn of the millennium, a signal called the broadcast is sent out, and it causes some people to develop powers. These people are known as divergents, but prefer to be called anomals. These can all harness the power of the proto-language, which I think is some ancient way of using language to control people or something. The story was so thrilling, I really couldn't take it all in. All these anomals are now being hunted down by Justice and arrested / killed, I don't know. But in true police state fashion, they just seem to take down anyone and everyone, including an old people using an out-of-date travel guide which caused them to accidentally show up at a closed motel. So basically, this game has a big focus on trying to explain the damage words can do in society, which could be a great message. Everyone should agree, hate speech is bad. But these bastions of inclusion get through their journey using words to hurt others, and quite a lot of the time, each other. The whole game feels like a walking contradiction. You end up with amazing powers such as trigger, cancel, discord, bully, and block. Using these powers actually results in the death of a good few people, but they're just brushed over. A man gets pummeled to death by a big robot gorilla, and no one even mentions it. I think this is because it just allows them to go through a gate, which they could have done at any point in time by reaching through and using the keycard, which they already had. Thing is, this guy isn't even threatening them, he's just cowering in a booth and they force him out. Right at the beginning of the game, they accidentally kill a justice officer. This can go down in one of two ways. They either pull their car over, which causes him to get hit, or they run from him and cause a pile-up behind them. The character Sai worries about this for a large part of the game, not because she caused the death of someone, but because she might get caught. See what I mean? These aren't nice people. Naturally, a game based on language and the power it wields contains a lot of talking. It plays a little like other games such as the Life is Strange series, where you spend most of your time walking around examining things and chatting to people to move the story on. Unlike the Life is Strange series, which contains interesting stories and likeable characters, this, as you know by now, does not. All the characters just seem to go in circles with their dialogue. It often feels like you have to go around and tell everyone in your crew the story so far, as if they haven't already lived through it. Or it could be due to the people having such short attention spans these days that repetition is the only way to get people to follow along. Or I'm not accusing them of it, but if you want people to start to believe a set narrative, repetition works. Where this differs from most games in this genre is that it does have combat sections, which if they actually implemented more of these and gave it a bit more of an Arkham Asylum feel, it could have saved some of the boredom. But the combat in this is just run in, hit the enemies with a bat, dodge and either shout words at them or taunt them. The taunts pull up a quick time event, and if you do this correctly you will launch forward and aim at one enemy, but you will also take out whoever's in your way. The combat is awful, but at the same time, it's incredibly easy, which is good for trophy hunters, as there is a trophy for completing the game without dying. The developers also knew this combat wasn't very interesting, as you have the option to skip any fight you want, or all of them by simply disabling it in the main menu. This might also be an extra inclusion/accessibility decision though, I don't know. I will say I don't know if you get the trophy for not dying if you skip them. This is due to there not being much information or guides online about this game. Well, why would there be? This game flopped, and it flopped hard. Apparently the Steam version had an all-time high of only about 68 concurrent players. When I was going for the different endings, I had to run the only guide I found online through a translator, as it was all in Russian, and in a game where you need specific choices, these words won't be precisely translated. This did cause me to have to guess a few of the dialogue choices, but I got there. Okay, so here's a bit more about the story. This broadcast which happened left behind these things called echoes. They're like pockets of disinformation that can make people angry and cause hate. They latch onto people's brains, but can also be squid. Yeah, I said squid. This game is weird. I'm not going to explain the squid. So another gameplay mechanic is to use this portable game console called the Meme. Yeah, that's the level of cringe we're working with in this game. To perform a Luigi's Mansion style minigame where you suck up the disinformation or pull it from people's heads. When you collect enough of these echoes, you can learn new words to yell at people. Removing these echoes from people's heads, of course, instantly makes them become a completely different person. Like you meet this gun-toting redneck stereotype, but when you remove his echo, he tells you that he doesn't even like guns. But about 30 minutes later, he shows up trying to blast people with a gun. Honestly, this game just feels like they threw everything at a wall and hoped it would stick. Which also brings me to their cover story. You're travelling across the country to escape to Canada, as you've stolen some data from the Puritans, which you don't even really find out what the data is until the end of the game, and even then the information's a bit spotty. You're doing this under the guise of being a touring punk band, who sadly don't play any punk music. Well, because you're a band, you also have to play gigs, so it has a Guitar Hero style rhythm section to it. This is not a good rhythm game though. It feels like it follows the vocals rather than the instruments, so this makes it more difficult than it should be. It makes sense for it to be following the vocals with the theme of the game, but yeah, that's not good for a rhythm game. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. You can just let these play out, and you can't fail, and the game will just continue. The only time you need to play well is for a trophy towards the end of the game, where you play in the Battle of the Bands. The trophy says you have to play perfectly at this show for a gold trophy. Online it says you have to hit everything with a perfect rating. I didn't do this, but I did unlock the trophy after playing every song in the game in this show with a 100% hit rate, not accuracy. So maybe that's the unlock criteria. I don't know. But all I know is it unlocked, so I'm happy. I have heard people talking about the lyrics in the game and making assumptions of what they're about, which could be true, but I think it's just songs with bad lyrics which are trying to be edgy but not offend. Plus they're meant to be a punk band. Of course they're going to sing about in-game politics. You can't say real-world punk bands have never done this, so I wouldn't read any further into this other than they're just shit songs. They all do seem to love this one pop song that keeps playing though, but it's almost insufferable with how generic it is. They sing along to it a few times, and towards the end of the game they even want to add it to their setlist, which makes no sense because they're not a real band and they're almost at the end of their journey and going to go their separate ways. You've already played all your gigs at this point. Throughout the game you're also haunted by visions of this small pasty child with a bowl cut. Even after finishing the game and confronting him at the end, I still don't really know who he is. But spoiler alert, he's interested in the fact that our main character is also pregnant, which seems like a bad choice for the story when the woman goes through a good number of stuff which would most likely put an end to this arc pretty swiftly. This includes being crushed under debris, falling off of a lot of stuff from decent heights, and even being stabbed in the abdomen. She's also incredibly skinny and still makes comments about feeling the baby kicking. I'm not a woman, and I haven't spent that much time around pregnant people, but I'd imagine that it wouldn't be possible at this point, but I could be wrong. Put it this way, she's able to hide it from everyone while having her midriff out the entire game. They could have easily just put her in some frumpy costume, and she still would have fit in with the aesthetic of the game. I also believe this game was just trying to be quirky because it could be. Like at one point, you go into an abandoned mall which was a cover-up for one of the game's libraries. These are places where others can connect to a thing called the Weave, like a dark web for anomals for sharing banned books, etc. But for an underground set of people, you'd think this would be quite normal. But when you go in, you meet this old woman with an artificial larynx, again, another forced disability, and her pet raccoon. You find out it's his birthday and end up singing the Marilyn Monroe rendition of Happy Birthday to a raccoon, in a party hat, and a t-shirt. Just leave the quirkiness up to Suda51 or Swery65. The thing is, this also doesn't come as a surprise, as the game has the JFK theme, and the raccoon is actually called Mr. President, so you kind of guessed a band would sing to him at some point. Again, sorry, this probably is just me rambling all over the place, but again, this game is just something else. Let's talk about the contradictions in the game again. The whole way through, they correct people's pronouns or lecture people on misgendering, but later on, when you meet the little person, they keep calling him small or throwing the odd jab. He does take it in his stride, which might be small, but it's mighty. Sorry, I had to say it. It just seemed like odd things to be saying when going with the rest of the narrative of the game. Also, the larger girl's side runs away about 2/3 through the game. When you go to look for her, they do actually quip that she can't be hard to find because she's big and shouldn't move too fast.
Sigh! How did she disappear so quickly? She's big and easy to see.
Good thing you're not looking for me.
Why the harsh words? I also don't know if they meant to do this, but she's the big tank character, and with the vitiligo, it's almost a cow pattern. It's like they were just trying to make a fat cow joke the entire time. Another spoiler also comes with her religion again. I felt it was strange with all the anti-Islamic sentiments going on these days that they chose her to be the traitor. You find out she's been working with the feds the whole time. But don't worry, she is sorry about it. I don't know if I'm reading too far into this, but it didn't need to happen. They could have chose any other character for this. To me, it would have made more sense if it was the Catholic guy. But then he's the only one in the game to actually die, and I guess they needed him to die in a T-pose, as if he was dying for everyone's sins or something. I don't know religion. It's a bit of a tough topic, and I'm not one to really put my points forward, as I'm not a religious man. This is just how it came off to me. I don't want this to turn into me putting down people for their beliefs. I'd never do that. The game also does try to show that even these characters can have prejudices. This mostly comes in the form of the main character, who's a bit bigoted towards robots at the beginning, but I feel this falls flat as robots don't really have feelings. Well, this one does develop them, but I do think it's only to push this narrative. Even the justice cops will freak out if you call them racist.
No, we're not racist.
Justice is all about diversity.
And inclusion.
But then they just go back to spewing their hate about the anomals, which is madness. If you found somebody who could heal people, why is this person not being treated like a god? I originally just wanted to do one of them trophy breakdowns and go through each trophy, as it's not a game that many people are going to go into detail with for the trophies. As I said, there are very little guides on the internet, and as I said, the ones I did find were in Russian, and translating them was pretty rough. I only used this guide though for the second and third playthroughs. Yeah, you have to play this game 3 times for the platinum. I don't know if this is actually true, but during the first playthrough, I pressed everything and couldn't seem to skip any conversations. It might have been because I played it before, but on the second and third playthroughs, it would let me press the circle button to speed things along. This meant I could run the game in about 6 or 7 hours of playthrough, but it was longer than this because I had to keep stopping and reading the guides. Most of the trophies unlock just from the story itself. The game is set out like a comic book, and completing each issue unlocks a trophy. The missable ones are for things like finding all the reflecting spots, which to unlock you will have to have the game fully updated as the version on the disc is broken. You also have to not wash a moustache off when it's drawn on your face. You force a computer hacker into manual labour watching him drag a tyre for a painfully long time. That perfect score at the Battle of Bands which I mentioned before. Picking up all the toys in a flashback. And the most annoying is completing a quest line called Henry Loves Betty. To do this throughout the game, you stop at different diners and gas stations. This quest has you collect the items from the robots who work in these places and pass them on from one to the next. This is annoying as it's easy to miss, as you don't know what will move the story on, and when you think you can go and gift the item to the robot, something can interrupt you and make you miss the window. Luckily, this game does allow you to load older saves, as for some reason it seems to make a new save for every autosave. I don't know why it does this, but it saved me a good amount of times, but it did also start to clog up the storage. The final whistle is for completing every fight in the game without dying. This isn't difficult, but I imagine you have to make sure you play all the fights and not skip any. Doing this in the first run also makes subsequent playthroughs easier, as you can skip all the combat. There is one for playing hide and seek, which isn't flagged as missable on true trophies, but you can refuse to play, so I imagine this would be easy to miss. The other trophies are just for different endings. This is where that guide I spoke about earlier came in handy. The endings change with different dialogue choices. Luckily, it's not too many of them that actually affect this, but using a translated guide, it meant the words translated didn't always line up with what I had to choose, but it was possible to work out what it was asking for, on most occasions at least. There seems to be a canon ending that everyone unlocks. As looking into how to unlock the other two endings, it sounds like it was a nightmare for people to work it out. So hats off to them. I wouldn't want to sit there and try and work it out. You see, throughout your game, you can check your character's coda, which is what their characteristic trait is currently from your choices, and shows you what ending they're going for. The problem is, these trophies are tied to your own coda, not theirs, which you cannot look at any point throughout the game. It's just revealed right at the end. So at the end, you're just keeping your fingers crossed, hoping you did everything in the correct order, and didn't accidentally choose something which swung it the other way. When I finally unlocked the Ronin ending, I followed the guide as close as I could, but I was still only 6% into the requirement. This means one wrong choice and it might have swung to a different ending. At the current time of me playing this, on True Trophies there was only 11 people who had the platinum on this. I am happy to say I've now bumped that up to 12. This is on that website though, not overall, but it's my platform of choice for trophy tracking. I don't know if this is due to it originally having broken trophies, or the fact that the game is just so painfully slow to play. You can't really do anything at any speed, and doing it 3 times is a slog. That's even with being able to skip through the dialogue, it still takes forever. It could also be that it's just not that fun. They could have actually made a great quirky game, as it does have quite a lot of depth to the scenarios, which you can play out in multiple ways, but it's the constant preachy tone that sucks out all the fun. This game came out in 2024. People shouldn't need a video game to push culture war ideals. Games are meant to be fun. Games should get you thinking about things in this world from time to time, but bullying people and shouting cancel at them isn't the way to go about it. People shouldn't need anything to try and influence their views. It should be done by life experience, and just an overall moral compass. Treat people how you want to be treated. I honestly try to live my life by one simple mantra of just don't be a dick. It's simple, but effective. I can 100% see why this was on many people's worst game of 2024 lists, and I haven't even delved into the idea that this was apparently made using stolen assets, and how some people didn't like the idea that this was made with taxpayers' money. I can't complain with that though, as games need funding. Sometimes something like this happens. It was also only a very small amount of money in the grand scheme of things, and of course money should be put into the creative arts. For every piece of media you don't agree with, many more will also be produced using these same programs which you probably enjoy. After all this though, I would say don't play this. It actually has no real redeeming features other than a rare platinum. I wanted to be able to walk away from this one actually saying it was a hidden gem and give it a go. As on paper this is something I should have loved, but sadly this one just didn't do it for me. Apparently the Xbox version wasn't even ever patched either, so you can't even get a completion over there. I'm glad this only cost me $9.95 delivered for the deluxe version, but even then I feel like I may have overpaid. But then again, I did get over 40 hours from it. I actually only wanted to play this game casually in the background as I had no plans for a video for it, but it was just such a surreal experience that I had to say something. I was worried about putting this video out as you can't talk about it without going into the discussion of things like religion, sexuality and gender. These aren't things I really speak about, and they are all things that are deeply personal to each person, and who am I to criticise them? I do believe these discussions are something which should be had, but they're so divisive these days that people just take sides and argue and no one listens. I myself don't think about any of these things in everyday life. We're all just trying to get through this crazy existence and trying to stay happy, but I do try to respect people's choices. Right, I didn't want to get into anything like that. I'll end this by saying, only play this if you're a glutton for punishment. This game could have been half the length if they removed a lot of the padded repetitive dialogue, a bit like this review. But if you can stomach that for 3 playthroughs, go for it if you want to. I will warn you though, you also have to listen to some very forced sounding fingering and blowjob jokes. I guess that might sell it for some people. Right, I'm out. This was incredibly rambly, I'm sorry, but I wrote this after 3 straight playthroughs and just jotted these thoughts down as they came to me. I'm happy to see the end of this one, and I can get back to playing games that people have recommended to me. And trust me, no one recommended I play this.